Good morning, Oak Crest family. I can say this, I am relieved that Mr. Petit cleaned up that verse for me because I'm preaching on Romans 15:13 as you read, not Romans 5:13, which talks about sin in the law. I'm not prepared to talk about that today. So I appreciate that when it went up, my body kind of went, oh no. Did I tell them the wrong? I looked back and I was like, no, I told them the right verse, and sure enough, you read it. So I appreciate that. That's helpful for me. As always, I'm excited to be here this morning. Two reasons primarily that I enjoy. I love coming to be with the Oak Crest family. One, it's an honor and a privilege always to come to share of the work and the ways in which God is moving, both at Cross and Crown and now more recently at the Christian Service Center. The work that goes on there, myself, Ivan Gonzalez, and the other volunteers that are able to be a part of that, it's an honor to work there, to be able to labor there and to be with the people of the community. And so to come to speak to those efforts and some of the things we are doing there, it is also an honor. It's a responsibility and a privilege, but it is a blessing to me, and I hope it's a blessing to you as well. The second reason I'm excited to be here this morning is because it's actually been a year. The last time I was here, I had 2 children. Now I have 3, so it's interesting how that works. I feel like every time I come, or every 2 years, I'm like, I add someone. I can guarantee you this is the last time I add anyone to my family. By my will and my wife's will. If God has other plans, then that's fine too. But her name is Sutton. So I have Landry's my oldest, then Quinn, and now Sutton is our youngest. She'll be a year in about 2 weeks. Her name is Sutton Ruth Whitmire, but we commonly refer to her in our household as the COVID baby because she was born during the COVID pandemic, and she didn't leave the house for a really long time, and her mom requires 6 feet of distance from everyone. So she's our COVID baby. That's what we call her sometimes. Speaking of families, just briefly, I want to talk about last week. Ivan Gonzalez spoke, and I wasn't able to be here. I watched online and followed that way through the Facebook Live, that's awesome. That's tremendous that is available to people that aren't able to attend or don't feel comfortable doing that. But as he was talking, he was speaking about different skills and different God-given abilities that each of us have to contribute to the kingdom, and which I agree 100%. And he alluded to how we also have deficiencies in certain things that maybe we don't do as well as the next person, which is also true. And he mentioned his example was dealing with the emotions of his daughter, and which again, saying we're on the same page so far. But I will say this: Ivan has a wife and a daughter. Okay, yes, that is factual. I have 3 daughters now, a wife that is female, and a female cousin living with me right now. So I don't want to hear any talk about not being able to relate to anyone in your home, because I've outnumbered him by at least twice as much. And I actually had more to say about that, but Ivan found out I was going to say that, and he reminded me, he said, hey, Luke, I grew up with 5 sisters. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to fall back from that. Ivan can have that. My family's complete. Even with our cousin, we're set. We're good to go. So anyway, Ivan, you can have that one. That's all you. But on a serious note, I brought up Ivan, and I did that intentionally, talking about the work at the Christian Service Center. Ivan, I have more to speak about as I talk about the ministry there, but before I do, I just want to communicate that Ivan, just the blessing that he's been to me, both personally, but also through the work that is done at the Christian Service Center. Ivan's skills are obvious, even if you don't know him, just from observation. His bilingualness is obviously tremendous. I speak a little bit of Spanish, but not enough to communicate the things that are really important and impactful in terms of faith and our Christian walk. So when Ivan is able to kind of reach deeper into another dimension, so to speak, that I'm not able to. And so that's very obvious. But also then just his familiarity with the community and the culture there. Again, white boy from Northside, I can do everything I can to accommodate people and to step into situations that may be messy and try to understand and empathize, but there's only so much I can do when it comes to that. That's just the reality of it. And Ivan is able to seamlessly step into certain scenarios where he's literally been there, done that, and he can communicate in that way. I was going to try to skip this point. I mentioned like the emotion of my family and the girls, and it's funny because I'm probably the most emotional person in my house, even with 5 girls, which we get a good laugh at. I mean, God's kind of that way. He's funny like that. God's funny like that. So, but I didn't want to miss an opportunity just to speak to the blessing Ivan's been to me and the community at the Service Center. As Connie introduced me this morning, I think I know a large percentage of the people that attend here at Oakcrest, but if I haven't met you, or maybe you weren't here last missions when I was presenting, my name is Luke Whitmire. I work at Cross and Crown Mission, and then more recently the Christian Service Center. Became a part of the ministry of Cross and Crown. So the easiest way I know how to describe it to people, and I still do it kind of on the fly when people ask, is Cross and Crown now has 2 locations, a North Cross and Crown, a South Christian Service Center. And we do a lot of the same things, but it just is a little smaller operation at the Christian Service Center. So a lot of what we do there, the things that we've been trying to implement as a ministry and as just a general culture of how we approach people and our relationships and prayer, it's much like Cross and Crown, just with the North and the South location. Our objectives are the same at the Christian Service Center as they are at Cross and Crown, and that's to proclaim the love, hope, and mercy of Jesus Christ through service and prayer. At our core, we are a prayer ministry. It's the first and best way that we know how to serve people. We don't want to diminish the realities that a lot of the people that we work with and that we stand beside are going through life experiences that I know I personally have never had to experience, whether it be hunger or living on the streets or dealing with just dealing with life circumstances that I would consider unfair. Our prayers for the community and our neighbors and ourselves are certainly influenced by those different scenarios and circumstances, but ultimately our prayers are much the same, regardless of the individual problems we encounter. We desire God's presence, and we desire God's will to be done. And it's really that simple. It's simple in the sense that each person that we serve, we have an understanding that when God is present, people can have that peace and that hope that we find. We read in Romans 15. Peace in knowing that our Creator, the one who formed us in our mother's womb, is present with us. We're not alone. Peace in knowing the one who holds the world in his hands, cares not only for the world, but for the person sitting right in front of us. And hope. When God is present, we have hope. Not only hope for our situation and beyond the current circumstances, but hope that God would move and work and heal and reveal himself. Hope not only for their current predicaments, but hope for eternity. This morning I have 3 objectives. My first is to encourage. My second is to convict, and my third is to remind. I want to encourage you in 2 ways. I want each of you to be encouraged by the stories that you hear. I want the reports and the happenings at the Christian Service Center to be encouragement to you. I want you to be encouraged to get involved with what's happening at the Christian Service Center, whether that means being physically present, financially invested in missions, or whether you become a prayer warrior for the daily ministry that takes place there. There's different ways everyone can be involved, whether near or far. My second intent is that you'll be convicted, not convicted in the sense that you feel awful or it makes you feel you're loathing or you're just so overwhelmed with how poorly you've done things, but convicted that you allow the Holy Spirit to soften the parts of your heart that maybe you've hardened or have been hardened. Hardened to people that live differently than you, look differently than you, struggle differently than you. And finally, I want to remind you. I want to remind each of you that God is moving. He's present in the community that surrounds the Christian Service Center. And he's present in the lives of those that are a part of the Christian Service Center. And I want to remind you that as followers of Jesus, we're God's handiwork, and he's created good works in advance for us to do. Before I do that, I do want to speak to just briefly, I say briefly, I'm very long-winded, my wife tells me, and I acknowledge. I do want to briefly speak to just some of the representatives from your church that have been a part of the ministry at the Service Center that likely, if they were not, the culture and the experience at the Service Center would not be what it is today. And when I say these things, the way things were before, just the ministry was just different than kind of the approach that Cross and Crown takes to things. I'll leave it at that. It's just different. Men like Dwight Heron and Steve Smith, who come and they serve each the days that they have to come and serve. They do the dirty work. They clean, they organize, they make food bags, they go through donations. They do a lot of things that I know myself and them, they're probably not ideal or the things that they necessarily want to do, but they do those things. And then they do the important work, navigating difficult situations or conversations with people dealing with job loss, the death of a family member, answering questions about faith and the nature of Jesus, and sometimes just sitting with people without interruption, just meeting neighbors and image bearers with the presence of God. People like Bill Sledge and Charlene Dietz, who bring donations from you all here at the church, and they drop those off. People like Christy Crawford and Laura Thomas, who come from the church to serve in the prayer room in the way that they do. You even have a member, appreciate it. Look, what I say, coming to serve, look at that. You even have a member at this church who I won't mention by name, who contacted me and wanted to contribute her stimulus check to the service center because she said she didn't have a need for it. And so we've created a program that encourages academic success for students. So if they show improvement in grades or show consistency with A's and B's, they can get gift cards for academy and for digs and different sporting extracurricular things and music-related interests if they need instruments or things like that she's contributed to. Then there are young people like Ian Fowler. Ian was an intern for us this summer. Incredible job. He pretty much revamped our entire clothing room. He's the one I think he's the only person younger than me there, and so I felt like, I can tell Ian what to do, right? I mean, everyone told me what to do when I was younger, so Ian, with the help of the youth group and Tyus, they revamped the entire clothing room, got us organized where it's so efficient, it's unbelievable. In addition to that, that's secondary to me. Ian provided a spiritual insight and a maturity that I believe was an encouragement for a lot of our older members that aren't necessarily Christian or don't have a faith. A lot of our volunteers that come from the community to serve because they think serving is important, but they really don't have an identity in Christ. Ian provided a lot of just conversation and spurred a lot of things that were very hopeful for both me and the other people there at the center. And finally, I want to mention, before I tell a couple stories about the service center, a lady, and I have more, but I never consider my time that I have to speak. I never consider the amount of time that I have to step back and cry and be emotional. So I'm going to skip a little about what I say about her, but I don't want to diminish just how important Judy Kennedy has been to me at the service center. This woman came. I mean, she's at the age of my grandmother. That's what I consider her a grandmother. She came to serve, and she was not 100% sure she felt comfortable being there. She was honest about that. She had some anxiousness and uncertainty about serving, and she showed up every day. She showed up before pre-pandemic. Every day she showed up. And she would sit with homeless, smelly, intimidating, you name it, across the board. She would sit with those men primarily and pray over them and listen to them and love them. And she also provided a lot of encouragement from me as well. She would stay after when everyone would leave, and she would talk to me, encourage me, and motivate me. And so I really appreciate Judy and her service that way. There's a woman that called the service center. Her name's Judy also, not the same Judy that I just spoke of. During the shutdowns back at the beginning of the pandemic, March, April, May, the service center, just like anywhere else, we were closed for a while. We weren't really sure what to do. We were a little bit paralyzed in terms of knowing how do we do what we do well when what we do well is we talk to people and we speak with people and we pray with people and we hold people and we meet people. There were a couple months where we didn't do that, and we had to, obviously, like everyone else, kind of figure out, okay, what is our game plan going forward? And so we actually, Ivan and myself, we started taking groceries, delivering groceries to people's homes, which is not something that we planned to do, but we were just it's a makeshift, like everyone else. We put up a sign-up list at the service center, give your name, your address, how many people are in your home. We'll supply food to your house once a week. And we did that for some time. And there was one lady, we get 10, 20 calls a day. Actually, Dwight Heron and a few others got involved because some of the deliveries were kind of outside of the Moore, Oklahoma City area. I think Dwight took some to Norman and some places beyond that. But there was one lady in particular, she would call, and her name was Judy, and older woman, handicapped, she's in a wheelchair that I learned later, but she would call, and I'm not kidding you, this is not a preacher's tale. She called 3 to 4 times a day for 2 weeks, and the messages were just heartbreaking. She would leave a 3-minute message when really all she was saying in the message is, I need food and I would like someone to pray for me. And so for the first 2 or 3 weeks, I would just take her food and pray with her on the spot, meet her at her apartment, kind of stand at the threshold of the door. She always had a little dog right there. She's in a wheelchair. I'd say, Judy, she'd always invite me in to eat and that kind of thing. Like, Judy, I'm not going to come in. Love to pray for you. Well, the more and more people learned about what we were doing, I kind of stretching my time thin, so I couldn't spend 15, 20 minutes praying with Judy. Like, I got other deliveries. And so we started getting other people involved. Like I said, Ivan, Dwight, and others. Well, then it became, she'd get food once a week, and now she wanted prayer every day. Again, awesome problem to have, right? Like, she wants someone to pray with her. So I did it for a few days, or like a week maybe, and then I was like, goodness, I cannot keep up with this woman. She wants so much prayer. It's unbelievable. And so I did what any good pastor would do. I outsourced her to someone else to pray for her. And it's funny, they don't know this. I actually outsourced her to 4 people. So 4 people would call her throughout the week, and every single one of them would pray with her at least once a day. In some cases, she would call them back to pray with them. And so she was covered in prayer. She got her groceries. Well, this one day in particular, I went to meet. This is before I had outsourced her. I went to her apartment, and I meet her, talking to her, and I see out of the corner of my eye this gentleman kind of watching me, I can feel him looking at me. And so I'm finishing with Judy, give her stuff, and kind of turn around. And I wouldn't normally mention this, but it's significant to the story. This is a large black man. I think he had a cutoff shirt out. Like, he was a large gentleman. And probably 6'2", 220 pounds or something, big dude. And so, like, I turn around, and he says, hey, come here. And so I was like, he's big, I'm going to go over there. And so I walk over there, and I was like, what's going on? He asked me what I'm doing. I explained what I'm doing, the groceries, the prayer, because we're closed, the Christian Service Center, you just need to call. He said, can I get groceries? And I said, absolutely. This is my last stop. I don't have any more on me. Call the number, leave a message. I'll bring you groceries. So sure enough, he did. Passed the weekend. I took groceries to Judy and him. And so as I take it to Judy, and I'm talking to her, her little dog's there at the door, and I turn around, and I'm going back to the van, and I hear, hey, white boy, get over here. White boy, get over here. And I'm like my back is turned, and I'm like, oh, gosh. Like, I'm frozen. And so, like, I slowly turn, and I'm, like, fully expecting this guy to be charging me. And he's kind of jogging a little bit. And then, sure enough, here comes the dog running to me, too. And he's like, hey, stop that dog, stop the dog. And I was like, and my family can test this. I don't hate dogs, but I don't like dogs. Even little, especially, like, little ratty-looking chihuahuas. And so, like, I'm not going to touch this thing. So I'm, like, doing this where I'm kind of, okay, here's your dog. I'm not touching your dog. He probably has COVID. I'm not going to do it, that kind of thing. And he picks up the dog, and I said, what did you yell at? What were you yelling? And he said, white boy. And I was like, who are you talking to? And he's like, talking to the dog. Dog's white boy. And I was like, oh. The dog was, and then I'm thinking, like, context. I'm like, dog's white. It's a boy. White boy. Okay, cool. So, like, I was like, all right, I'm going to get your groceries. He's like, all right, thanks, man. And, like, that was it. And I was like, okay, cool, white boy. So anyway, I got his groceries, got him to him, and then ended up praying with him. And obviously I tell that because it is funny. Like, that part of the story is funny. But, like, more than anything, like, again, this gentleman, large gentleman, I probably wouldn't have approached him if he wouldn't have called me out. Like, this guy wanted groceries, and I ended up getting to pray with him. And the same with Judy. Like, Judy wanted groceries, and she needed groceries. But, like, more than anything, she just wanted to connect with someone and for somebody to acknowledge her. Because I doubt, I know she wasn't leaving her apartment. I know that she just desired that prayer and that presence. And so that's what I could provide. And that wasn't that difficult for me. And I know it wasn't for the others that come to serve and love the way that they do. And like I said, I have like 5 pages of stories here of people that I could go on and on about that just desire prayer. All these people that come for these different things. And now I can literally name you 15, 20 people that I've met in the last 6 months that come for nothing except prayer. They walk in the door, and our natural response when people walk in is, hey, what are you here for? What do you need? Do you need food? Do you need clothes? Do you need access to medical care? Do you need access to legal aid? And we run the gamut, all these different things, and we have a handful of people that will say, I'm just here, can you pray with me? Yeah, I can pray with you. Here's Dwight, here's Steve, here's Ivan. And that's who we are as a ministry. We're just available and we're present. And God does wonderful things. I do want to, as I close, I've gone over my time, but I do, let me just read you this. I didn't read all my stories, but these stories are real. They involve real people with real needs. These are just a few of the stories that I have the honor of working with people at the Service Center. Dwight, Steve, Ivan, Judy, Christy. They all have names and prayers and prayer requests of stories who desire God, who desire prayer, who desire God's presence. And this morning, my prayer is by the power of the Holy Spirit that we receive all the joy, peace, and hope as we trust in Him. And with that same power, you will be encouraged, convicted, and reminded in all the ways in which God is moving, both in the physical space at the Christian Service Center, but also within the hearts and the souls of the people. God bless you.